Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be taking a look at BT07, and BT07 offers us some new and interesting cards to think about using in some old decks. And one of the older decks is going to be the Greymon Tribal deck. So the Greymon Tribal deck is mostly centered around Nokia and being able to use Nokia to play your Agumons for free while reducing the cost of evolution into your higher stages to make it even more efficient to play some of your cards. And even though in BT07 we didn't get a whole lot of updates, we still got some really good tools to think about utilizing, and this is going to be a relatively cheap and fun deck to play, and you could even tech and tune the deck in some various different ways to even make it cheaper depending on what your budget actually is. So even though this isn't going to be like super high tier competitive, it's still a really fun and effective deck, and when played correctly can still do a lot of work. So without further ado, onto the deck profile. Starting off with the Digitama, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Koromon. So Koromon is going to be that draw engine Digitama that was lacking in a lot of other red decks, but it's present here just because, well, we could actually take advantage of it. So what it's doing is its inheritable ability states that when we attack once per turn, if this Digimon's name contains Greymon or Omnimon, then we get to draw 1 card. So literally just attacking with our Greymons is going to allow us to draw cards, and that's what we really want to gain out of the Digitama slot, because we have various other ways to boost our own DP, so we don't need the DP boost on the Digitama slot as much as other decks. But as far as the 5th Digitama, you don't necessarily have to run a 5th Digitama. I'm running one because I like running one, and the 5th Digitama of the deck I'm choosing is going to be 1 copy of Kapurimon. So Kapurimon is one of the easier ways that Red has access to DP boosting, just because we already know we're going to be playing a decent number of Tamers, so that's going to make Kapurimon's ability online just as easy as something like Debimeramon. So its inheritable ability is just a very stereotypical DP boost of plus 1000 DP during your turn while you have a Tamer in play, just making it a very easy card to use. Next, on to the rookies, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Agumon. So this is the BT01 version of Agumon, and this is going to be the Tamer Digger for the deck. So it has this on-play ability where we get a look at the top 5 cards of our deck, and then add 1 Tamer card, regardless of color, from among them into our hand, and then the rest go to the bottom. So that way we just want to use this card in combination with Nokia to be able to search out some of our other Tamers, or just use this card to try to search out our Tamers in general while we're trying to build something in Raising. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Agumon. So this is the BT04 version of Agumon, and we're using this just because it has a decent interaction with Digiburst because of its inheritable ability. So its inheritable ability states that during your turn, when this card is trashed due to the Digiburst ability, then we get to return it to our hand, so that way we have another card to be able to use in combination with Nokia, and it's just a good card to use because we are going to be playing around with some Digiburst abilities while also being an Agumon. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Agumon. So this is the BT05 version of Agumon, and this Agumon is going to be the deck's dedicated digger. So what it's digging for is our Omnimon and our Greymons. So we get to look at the top 3, and we get to pick up 1 Omnimon and 1 Greymon from among them and add it into our hand, and then the rest go to the bottom in classic digging fashion. So we're just using this card to be able to try to find our parts and pieces to be able to make the deck more consistent. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Agumon. So this is the first promo Agumon, and this Agumon is really good just because it has a nice on-play ability to try to delete the opponent's Digimon with 3000 DP or less. So there's a lot of rookies that you want to be targeting with this card, namely it's going to be those anti-meta rookies, but regardless, this is still just really good at also picking off Pokemons on the field, so that way you could try to deal with some of the opponent's potential problems that they're going to be threatening you with very powerful plays, making Agumon just a really good card to be using, especially in combination with Nokia. And then the last rookie of the deck is going to be 3 copies of Agumon. So this is the second promo version of Agumon, and this Agumon is just going to be a filler slot to just try to DP boost some of our Digimon to make them a little bit stronger. Considering almost everything on our higher levels except for Omnimon are Greymon cards, I think this is just a really easy card to use, but it could really be any card that's DP boosting your Digimon that you feel like you want to use. And this card is just a powerful DP boost because of its inheritable ability to give anything with Greymon in its name plus 2000 DP, so that way we can make them relatively strong relatively easily. Next, on to the champions, I'm going to be running 2 copies of GeoGreymon. So GeoGreymon is actually a pretty underrated card just because he's adding some extra control into the deck on an earlier stage to try to deal with those potential problematic rookies that I mentioned before. So he has this nice Digiburst ability where we get to just trash 2 of his Digivolution sources to be able to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with 4000 DP or less, and a GeoGreymon play could actually take the opponent by surprise because they might be able to leave a Digimon on the field that he'll be able to delete, and they might not expect you to be running this card to be able to delete those Digimon. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Greymon. So this is the BT05 version of Greymon, and this Greymon is really good just because, well, he helps gain some memory and make our evolutions on top of our Agumons even cheaper, just because he'll be able to gain the memory when we Digivolve into him, pair that up with Nokia, and it could basically make for a free evolution on our level 4 slot, which is really, really good and tempo efficient. But the other reason why we want to use this card is because he's also DP boosting our Omnimons and our Greymons as a good inheritable source by 2000 DP, making whatever Digimon we're using on top of them even stronger than they normally would be. And this is kind of the reason why we don't necessarily need to run DP boosts on our Digitama slot, just because we have DP boosts in various other ways. And then the last champion of the deck is going to be 4 copies of the starter deck Greymon. So this could be replaced with something else in case you don't have access to the card, but this is still just that good of an inheritable ability to be using just because Security Attack +1 allows you to deal even more damage to your opponent. On top of the fact that it is a Greymon by name, so it's taking advantage of all the Greymon-based synergies that this deck has to offer. Next, on to the ultimates, I'm going to be running 4 copies of MetalGreymon Alterous mode. So MetalGreymon Alterous mode is a really strong card for us to be using because we have multiple different ways on how we could approach using this card. So the first big thing is he has 2 alternative Digivolution costs, so he could Digivolve on top of a level 4 for 3, which is normal, but he also allows us to use him as a pseudo-mega, where we could Digivolve him on top of a level 5 for 1. And then on top of that, we want to Digivolve him on top of our other level 5s because of his when Digivolving ability, where if a Digimon with MetalGreymon and its name is in this Digimon's Digivolution source, then we get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with 4000 or less DP, thus trying to control the field even more just for the act of Digivolving. And then on top of that, he has his own nice inheritable ability that we've seen so many times before in the BT05 Greymon line, where it's just going to be DP boosting our Omnimons and our Greymons that he's Digivolving into by 2000 DP, making whatever we're using even stronger if we're not using him to aggress. And then we actually did get a new MetalGreymon coming from BT07 that's actually a pretty solid MetalGreymon to be using. So what this MetalGreymon is doing is he has a nice on-play ability that just allows us to try to play our Tamers more efficiently than we've ever had before, and if we already have a Tamer, then we get to gain some memory, making him just cheaper to play as a whole to be able to easily go up into our higher stages. So his on-play ability more specifically is looking for red Tamers to play, but we still have a solid red Tamer that we want to use to be able to use this ability. And then on top of that, it has a really good inheritable ability that we want to take advantage of, where during your turn, once per turn, when we delete one of the opponent's Digimon, then we get to gain 1 memory, and we could pair this up with Alterous mode to be able to get up into Alterous mode, delete one of the opponent's Digimon because it Digivolved on top of this MetalGreymon, and then gain a memory for that, basically making its evolution free. So it's just a very solid card to be using in combination with this deck, especially with all of the different control type tools that we have to be working with. And then the last level 5 of the deck is going to be 3 copies of MetalGreymon. So this is the classic collection version of MetalGreymon, and this is just another good aggro tool to be using. So he has his own when attacking ability to make him an aggressive choice to use in case we don't see our level 6s, where when this Digimon is attacking a player, then we get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with 4000 DP or less. So again, just trying to control those pesky low-level Digimon is just a really solid thing to do. And then on top of that, what we're really trying to use the card for is his inheritable ability to be able to give our Dragonkins or Machine-type Digimon the piercing ability, which, well, WarGreymon is a Dragonkin, so he's just going to be able to give whatever we're Digivolving into the piercing ability. Note this does not work with Omnimon, but that's okay, because it's just making our level 6s more aggressive as a whole, and most of the time we're just using Omnimon as a game finisher. Next, on to the level 6s, I'm going to be running 3 copies of VictoryGreymon. So the fun thing to know about VictoryGreymon is he actually is a Dragonkin to be able to take advantage of the classic collection MetalGreymon. And then on top of that, he has his own really solid when digivolving ability to be able to try to control the field with even more. So his when digivolving ability is a Digiburst ability, so that incentivizes us to want to use him in combination with the BT04 Agumon as well, but his Digiburst ability is Digiburst 2. We get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with 8000 DP or less, and if the opponent isn't necessarily going to be running a whole lot of high-level Digimon, and the game is shifted more towards those mid-level Digimon, then he's a perfect card to use to delete those mid-level Digimon with. And then the last level 6 of the deck is going to be 3 copies of WarGreymon. So this is the classic collection version of WarGreymon, and this is a pretty decent card to be using just because he has the Blitz ability. And the fact that it has Blitz just makes it an even more usable card, because if we're going to be passing the turn over to the opponent, we could still get the attack off with this WarGreymon, and then we could use this in combination with some of our other cards to do even more powerful things with. So he also has a secondary ability that's adding some extra control, but because blockers aren't necessarily going to see a whole lot of play, his second ability isn't going to trigger very often. But it's still important to note that when he does attack a player, if we have a Tamer in play, we do get to delete a Digimon with blocker to try to get rid of those pesky blockers to be able to deal some additional damage and trigger some of our various abilities for controlling the opponent's field. And then the last Digimon of the deck, and only level 7 of the deck, is going to be 2 copies of Omnimon. So this is the BT05 Omnimon, and we're using this card just because he's going to be acting as the primary game finisher. So we're going to try to break and chip the opponent's security, and then we're going to use this Omnimon to close out the game with, just because he has 2 very powerful when digivolving abilities of being able to suspend this Digimon to be able to attack, and Blitz to, well, be able to attack even when the memory passes over on the opponent's side. And then if we don't close out the game with him, then we could use his other ability to just to sit passively on the field and try to be a menace to keep up the pressure on the opponent, just because during all turns, when this Digimon would be deleted or returned to the hand or deck by the opponent's card effects, then we get to trash a level 6 to keep this Digimon on the field. Next, on to the option cards. The option cards could really be anything you want it to be. I'm just going to be using 2 copies of Giga Storm, just because its main ability can delete up to 2 of the opponent's Digimon with 8000 DP or less to be able to handle wide fields and slightly stronger Digimon. And then on top of that, it's also a really solid security threat, with its security ability activating its main, so that way we could try to delete those pesky Digimon, whether it's in our hand or in our security. Next, on to the Tamers, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Marcus. So Marcus is going to be the deck's dedicated memory fixing Tamer to prevent us from being choked, so we can make our plays as efficient as we possibly can. And then on top of that, he also has some really good Greymon interaction, where when our Greymons are attacking, then we get to suspend the Tamer to be able to gain a memory to make some powerful follow-up plays with. My favorite thing to do with this version of Marcus is pair him up with Blitz, so that way when we attack with our Blitz WarGreymon, then we get to suspend this Marcus and try to prevent passing the turn over to the opponent. So that way we could then continue our turn and make even more powerful follow-up plays with, like digivolving into Blitz Omnimon for basically a second attack. So that's just my favorite thing to be doing, but the tempo that Marcus can provide is still really important for the deck. And then the last Tamer of the deck is going to be 3 copies of Nokia. So Nokia is kind of the glue that ties this deck together, just because of all of the abilities that we're playing with to make this card even more usable in this style of deck than some various others. So she has a nice on-play ability where we get to play just an Agumon or just a Gabumon from our hand for free, so we could use this in combination with any of our Agumons with really solid on-play abilities to try to take advantage of them. And then on top of that, we also can try to take advantage of her main ability while she's sitting on the field, where when we digivolve one of our Digimon into a Gabumon, Omnimon, or Greymon, then we get to suspend this Tamer to be able to reduce the cost of that Digivolution by 1, to make it easier to go up our stages, to make it faster to go up our stages, to make more powerful plays with. So she's just doing everything that the deck wants to be doing. making her just one of the best tamers that this deck can have. And then on top of that, the fact that she has an on-play ability means that she could also be a potential security threat because, well, all tamers have the security ability to be able to play themselves for free, and then you get her on-play ability to be able to play an Agumon to then do various other things with. So all of that synergy in combo play just makes her a really solid tamer for the deck to use. And then there's still just a lot that you could do with the deck depending on the types of cards you want to tech or include inside of it. So as far as a good alternative Digitama to use, you could use Demi-Meramon as one of the other easiest Digitamas to try to gain some generic DP when we're attacking the player to try to make our Digimon even stronger than they normally would. But like I said, most of the time we don't necessarily care about the DP boost just because we have other innate ways to gain that DP. Then if you want to lower your Agumon count, then you also could think about running some anti-meta cards like Gaussmon to try to stop the opponent from reducing their Digivolution costs, making it harder for their level 5 hybrids to be played, on top of the fact that the more Gaussmons that you have on the field, the stronger your other Gaussmons will be to use as a very aggressive rookie. Then we also do have the BT06 Agumon and the Bond package that we could consider running, just because if you want to tech the deck to include more ties, then this card makes playing your ties even easier, whether it's the BT01 tie or the BT06 tie, it doesn't matter, it just makes them easier to play in general by gaining you an additional memory when you play them, and then on top of that, he's going to be interacting with the Bond of Bravery if you want to take the Bond of Bravery approach. Speaking of Bond of Bravery, we also have Bond of Bravery as a really solid level 7 to try to act as a control type tool to be able to delete the opponent's Digimon that are basically weaker than him, on top of being able to burn the opponent's security stack, so that way you're trying to reduce the amount of security threats that could be checked. And then, like I stated before, with the whole Bond package, we also do have the BT06 Bond to just interact with our Agumon and our Greymon cards, just because the majority of the deck is already Agumon and Greymon cards, to be able to gain us some additional card draws and some additional memory to make more powerful plays with. Even if you're not using the Bond effect to be able to warp an Agumon into a Bond, this tie is still just a very powerful tamer for us to be using as a whole. And then speaking of really powerful tamers, we also do have the BT01 tie to try to help our level 6s, and we could change up our level 6s to better use this tie to give whatever level 6 we're using security attack +1. We could even use this in combination with MetalGreymon Alterous mode, just because it's specifically looking for red Digimon with 4 or more Digivolution sources and not level 6 specifically. But we still have some other really good Agumon cards that we could think about using, so we also do have the starter deck Agumons to just also help as some generic ways to gain some extra DP. Then as far as some alternative Greymons, if you don't feel like running the starter deck Greymon, just because that card might be a little bit inaccessible, we do have the BT01 Greymon to just help further DP boost, or we do have the starter deck GeoGreymon to be able to act as a solid security threat while being able to delete and control the opponent's field as well with its on-play ability. Then if you want to tech and tune the deck a little bit differently to try to incorporate more Digiburst synergy, then we even have WarGreymon from BT04 to try to help play our Tamers more efficiently with his Digiburst ability and try to control the field even better when we're swinging with his inheritable ability. Then as far as some really good alternative level 6s that we could use the BT01 WarGreymon just because he's going to give himself the security attack plus, and then this does transfer over to the BT05 Omnimon when you decide to use that Omnimon as well, on top of the fact that he turns off option cards in the opponent's security, making him a relatively easy and safe swing. Then if you do want to try to control the field even more, we do have access to the promo WarGreymon to be able to delete Digimon all the way up to 13,000 DP if we have a tamer in play. And then his when attacking ability is also pretty good because it's just another continuous way to delete those low level Digimon. And if you want an alternative Omnimon to be running in the deck, then you could run the BT01 Omnimon just because the multi-swing potential off of this card is really good, on top of the fact that when we Digivolve into him, he could delete a Digimon on the field and all Digimon of the same name as that Digimon, so this could be a pretty powerful control tool in of itself. Or you could just run Omnimon X Antibody to try to stop some of the opponent's aggression and to try to control the field when he's going to be swinging as well. Then we do have some really solid option cards that we have access to. So we have access to some boost cards, and one of the best boost card, even though it's not actually boosting, is A Delicate Plan to turn off the opponent's option cards in their security, which is pretty important. And then we have some really solid removal tech that we could think about incorporating depending on what you want to gain out of the removal. So if you want big body removal, you could play something like Gaia Force. If you want small body removal, you could run something like Atomic Blaster. And then if you just want to be able to play your Tamers more efficiently while removing a body, then we even have Trident Revolver. Then, if you're still worried about the deck's overall consistency, we do have Red Memory Boost to help with its overall consistency, looking for our red Digimon while also helping us build up a very powerful play with the ability to gain 2 memory at a later turn thanks to the delay ability. But that just goes to show there's a whole bunch of different ways that you could build the deck and approach the deck depending on what you're looking to play and what cards you're going to try to be using. And I think with just the theme of using Agumons and Greymons, there's a lot of room for flexibility and customization, especially in the future when we get more Agumons and more Greymons. But for now, it's not looking to do the absolute best in B Tier 1, Tier 0 Hyper Meta competitive just because of how hybrid meta is played, but that doesn't stop it from being a really fun casual deck to play, and this is just a pretty solid core or shell for what Greymons could be doing in BT07. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.